I felt bad that I didn't want navigation. They asked me, well, you're still eligible to fly. You have no air sickness problems or anything. So I said, well, I finally decided on gunnery school, but they said, but you have to go to a tech school first.
Okay.
So they said you could go to AM school, that's aviation mechanics school, or radio operator, or armament. Well, I chose armament at the time. And so that went, then I went from Santa Ana to Lowry Field, Colorado, and took armament. In the meantime, you had to keep signing up. You had to go out and read the bulletin board, you know, right next to the day room.
Yeah.
You know where the barracks are, kind of, and you had a day room or where you could play pool and all that stuff when you're off duty. So I signed up to go to gunnery school, and I had no idea where it would be. So after armament school, I think I made corporal at that time, I think. And then I got sent to Kingman, Arizona.
Okay.
They had a gunnery school. In fact, that became an Air Force graveyard for airplanes after the war.
Yeah.
They were just as far as the eye could see at that place, I guess.
Yeah.
From there, we got sent to Lincoln, Nebraska to get crewed up. We knew we were going to be in a bomber crew. We didn't know anybody there. In Lincoln, Nebraska, I was there about 2 or 3 weeks, and you went through a high-altitude pressure chamber, you know, to see how you react to that. And the guy that was sitting next to me, he ended up being one of our waist spinners.
Okay.
But at that time, I didn't know him. He was a Texan. And from there, we got sent to Alexandria, Louisiana. And we had about 2 or 3 months of crew training.
Yeah.
You know, flying out over the Gulf and Gulf of Mexico and all that sort of thing. And landing at a few airfields here in the United States. And then they had to decide which guy was going to be the co-pilot or the pilot, amongst all the other things. And then from there, we had a 1-week delay en route before we went overseas, so I met my father in Chicago. We had some friends there. And from there we reported to Kearney, Nebraska. The crew, the guys went home, you know, for a few days first, and then we left Kearney, Nebraska. We picked up a brand new airplane in Kearney, Nebraska, and we flew that over to England. That was pretty typical. There were other places too.
Yeah.
And it took us about 2 weeks to get all the way over to England because we flew from Kearney to Rainier Field, New Hampshire. How in the hell I can remember all that? I did.
They're not always here.
And then from there to Goose Bay, Labrador.
They're never here. They're just today.
And then from there to Reykjavik, Iceland. And then from there to Valley, Wales.
Yeah.
They had other places in England, in the British Isles too. Prestwick, Scotland was another one. But we landed at Valley, Wales, and they took over, the military took over that airplane then. And I don't think we ever saw it again. Although I have a book at home that lists all the B-17s.
Yeah.
And I do remember the airplane that we almost didn't get back from a mission. And the only reason I remembered it was a guy sent me a letter only about 4 or 5 years ago. He was from Holland, but he was been a little kid, and he listed this airplane as Bouncin' Annie. And the number was 2577, the last four numbers on the tail. So I looked that up, and that was the airplane we were in. 3 months before that airplane was shot down.
Okay.
In our crew. They made a composite squadron. It was my sixth mission. October 7th, 1944. We lost 8 B-17s out of 12.
Yeah.
That's the thing that around October the 7th, or a little before, the bombardier or myself try to remember it and recall each other on the telephone.
Yeah.
We've been doing that for quite a while.
Well, that's good to remember those people that you lost.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
And the irony is, here he flew way up in front and I flew in the back. And he was an officer. Sid Mandel. He was from Chicago then, but he moved to California after he got out of the service and got married, like most of us. Our pilot died of cancer in 1982. And I ran into him, of all things, in California when I was visiting my dad and his wife. My dad had remarried about 3 years after my mom died. And so then that's when I was down in LA visiting them with my wife, and our daughter, she was about a year old then, and that was 1948. And but I met him. I was looking at want ads for a job, maybe down in Los Angeles in that area. I kind of liked it down there as I remembered it in the service. And Southern California was entirely different then.
Right.
Than it is now.
Yeah.
And anyway, he showed up one day. Well, I saw him in a park in downtown Los Angeles. I bought a newspaper. And I happened to look up, and there was this guy standing across the street, waiting for a bus or something. I said, "See, that looks like Brownie, Dick Brown, you know." I said, I couldn't believe it. So I yelled. I took a chance. I said, "Hey, Brownie," and he looked up. And I'll be damned. So we hugged each other there and shook hands. And he says, "What are you doing down here?" And I says, "Well, I could ask you the same thing." He says, "Well, I'm going to Loyola University taking law." So about a few days later, he came and visited us. So I told him where I was visiting my dad and my stepmother. So he came up, and God, we must have fought the war all over again. My dad had been in World War I in the infantry in France.
Yeah.
And he was an immigrant, my dad, from Finland. And my mom, too. She came over here in 1912, my mom did. And she did housework, that sort of thing, for other people. That was typical of Scandinavian maids and so forth. Howdy.